Alrighty. It's probably... Oh, Citrus Peppercorn, thank you for resubscribing. That is... The timing of that is perfect. But also, we got to get the elephant out of the room, out of the way, or the elephant in the room out of the way, honestly. So, over the weekend, we watched something weird happen. Last weekend, Trump had a military parade and got very, very sad that the parade was not the biggest, most bestest thing of all time. Though, of course, he'll never tell you that it wasn't the big or best thing. He'll just tell you that's the biggest and bestest ever, because that's what he does. He's always done that. But it's really weird to me to see somebody do a giant military parade and then basically tell Iran that it's a shame they didn't sign a particular deal because it would be a horrible waste of life, and then subsequently bomb their country. Now, the reasons that were given were an attempt to halt the Iranian nuclear program. It doesn't help that Iran is involved in an armed conflict with Israel right now, when Israel is considered a ally to the United States. So there's definitely some weirdness going there. It feels more like this is not to stop a nuclear program that may or may not be developing weapons, but more to just save face and show strength, especially after having a military parade. But let's go and get into what we know about everything going on here first, okay? This article comes to us from the BBC. They said Iran is weighing its response to U.S. strikes carried out against its nuclear site and weekend, which American officials say have significantly set back the prospect of Tehran building a nuclear weapon. The strikes were launched as Israel and Iran continued to attack each other after a long, simmering regional rivalry escalated into direct conflict earlier this month. This is from 12 hours ago, so this news is already kind of out of date, because Iran actually did respond to the United States attack by attacking the military base that we have in Qatar. So we've already seen a military response from Iran here, and they've basically said that for every bomb that was dropped on their facilities, they have sent a missile over into the military base in Qatar. The strikes were launched on Israel as Israel and Iran continued to attack each other after a long, simmering regional rivalry escalated into direct conflict earlier this month. The impact and wider implications of the U.S. strikes on Iran are still becoming clear. Here's what we know so far. The operation, codenamed Midnight Hammer, involved 125 U.S. military aircraft and targeted 3 nuclear facilities, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan. They were hit between these times here you can read on screen, and were hit between Saturday and Sunday. U.S. Jen Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, disclosed more details during a press conference. The aircraft took off from the U.S. and made an 18-hour journey to Iran. Some jets were sent west into the Pacific as a decoy, while others went ahead of the main bombers to ensure airspace was clear. 7 B-2 stealth bombers tasked with hitting the nuclear sites flew into Iran and avoided detection. At the same time, 24 cruise missiles were launched at the Isfahan site from a submarine. In total, 75 precision-guided weapons were used during this operation. Okay. 14 GBU massive ordnance penetrators were dropped on the Fordo site, a nuclear enrichment facility buried deep below a mountain outside of Tehran, which is vital to Iran's nuclear ambitions. Citrus Peppercorn, thank you for the 245 bits. Says, my sister is a medic at the base Iran struck. They had already moved them into a mall in Qatar's capital city. Yeah, so the interesting thing about this so far, before I go any further, is it seems that the U.S. strike had 0 civilian casualties, or 0 casualties, and the strike on Qatar had 0 casualties. It looks like the loss of life has been severely minimized in both situations. The bombs weighed 13,000 kilograms each, are able to penetrate... They're bunker busters. Cool. Shortly after the strikes, President Donald Trump, who had been publicly calling for a deal to curb Iran's nuclear program, made a televised address and said future attacks would be far greater if Iran did not agree to a deal, adding, remember, there are many targets left. So he's also stated that any counter-assault that is sent our way will be responded to in greater force. So Trump seems to already be basically in the running to try to escalate a war. Now, I don't know if that's what's going to actually happen, but as somebody who grew up during the Bush administration, let me go ahead and tell you what parallels I'm seeing right now and why they kind of scare me a little bit. When I was a kid, an attack happened on United States soil. That attack has a billion conspiracies around it, and we're not covering any of those right now because they're quite frankly not important. It was one of the first times that we had seen an attack on our soil in a while, and it scared a lot of people. It spooked a bunch of people. This led to Bush being able to gain enough support to start a war in the Middle East. The ostensive reason for this was to stop weapons of mass destruction. Over the course of several years throughout the Bush administration, attempts to find these weapons of mass destruction never yielded any true results. So much so that we have memes of Bush saying, well, the WMDs, they're there somewhere. They're there somewhere. We're still trying our best. We're still trying to find them. At a certain point, you just kind of have to accept that there probably weren't any, not to the degree that the Bush administration was trying to find. So don't get me wrong, I choose living here over living in the U.S. hands down. I just don't think fuck-ups are heavenly choirs. I don't know what any of that is in response to. It looks like it's in response to something in the chat. Citrus Peppercorn says Iran had already moved equipment and personnel out of the way. The U.S. moved equipment and personnel out of the way. 17 out of the 19 were from Saudi Arabia, not a conspiracy, and not from Iraq. Dan says the weapons of mass destruction are still in the factory warehouse in Texas. Yeah. So, in my time growing up, I saw my country embroiled in a conflict it really didn't have a whole lot of business being embroiled in for years and years and years under these pretenses. I am watching the Trump administration do this all over again. It's really strange to me hearing conversation about Obama and drone strikes and all that fun stuff when it was a war started by a Republican president. And here we are again with a Republican president who is promising to escalate violence if anything is thrown our way at all, despite the fact that we threw our own punch into the ring. Since then, Trump has had the strikes. Trump has said the strikes caused monumental damage, adding in a social media post, "Obliteration is an accurate term." Satellite images taken on the 22nd of June show 6 fresh craters clustered around 2 entry points at the Fordo nuclear site, most likely where the U.S. bombs fell, as well as gray dust and debris scattered down the mountainside. Stu Ray, senior imagery analyst at McKinsey Intelligence Services, assessed those images for BBC Verify. He said, "You will not see a huge blast effect in the entry point, as it is not designed to detonate on entry, but deeper down into the facility." He also said satellite pictures appear to show tunnel entrances that had been blocked off, which may have been an Iranian attempt to mitigate against deliberate targeting of the entrances by aerial bombardment. The Iranian Atomic Energy Organization has called the bombing on the nuclear sites a barbaric violation of international law, while the U.S. has claimed the strikes have severely disrupted Iran's nuclear program. However, Hassan Abedeni, a deputy political director of Iran's state broadcaster, claimed the 3 sites targeted by the U.S. had been evacuated a while ago, and that Iran didn't suffer a major blow because the materials had already been taken out. Both Saudi Arabia and UN's nuclear watchdog said that there had been no increase in radiation levels since the attack. So, what has happened so far is that we've got 2 facilities that have been attacked. We have the facilities we attacked, which had apparently all of the important stuff ripped out of them before our attack hit, which means it didn't do a whole lot of stuff. Okay, so if the point was to cease the nuclear program in Iran, then attacking an area and then them moving all the material and research and everything out, I don't know how much that's going to curb it, unless the idea is do a lot of damage now, and then if you continue, we're going to do more damage. Here's the thing that confuses me, though. Here's the thing that confuses me. Not that I have any love for Iran and its dictatorial way that it handles women and gay people and everything else. I'm not going to come to bat for a country that I don't live in and, quite frankly, don't have a high opinion of. But it is weird to me to do the whole America can do war crimes and can have nuclear weapons, but nowhere else can. That's bad if they have it. Like, we are very, very full of ourselves, feeling like we are the one good ones that can have them. Again, it's not saying that I want other countries that could potentially ruin the lives of everybody around them to have access to these weapons. I don't. I just find the rationale interesting. And if there's anything to make a country want to accelerate its nuclear plans, it's demonstrating how powerful bombs are and how good nukes would be. Now, granted, we did not use nukes. We used bunker busters. So that does change things a little bit. How might Iran retaliate and what has happened since then? Okay, so this part is already out of date because Iran has already retaliated. Again, they have sent missiles over to our base in Qatar and have basically leveled the thing. But again, people and material and everything were already removed from there. How efficient that has been, I'm not 100% certain, because when it comes to anything like this, when it comes to getting a little bit of time and, being told everything you know and love and everything you use is going to have to be evacuated out of an area, it's very likely things have been left behind that are important. We just don't know what those things are. That's stuff that's going to come out in the wash as time goes on. Citrus says, let me tell you, there is a crazy country that has nukes. It's called Israel. Yeah. I was watching an episode of The Soy Pill that said that it was from 4 years ago, and it said, hey, in the future we might watch Israel commit the world's greatest irony. And it was showing camps. It was showing camps. And, it definitely seems like we've gotten to that point. Holocaust bad. So Israel decides Holocaust 2 might be even better. We just have to do it on brown people that nobody likes, and then suddenly it'll be better. It'll be easier. We can manage it then. Old Guest says, on topic, there's equal parts the low-scale response as the military... Okay, the way that's worded is weird to me. Let me try that again. On topic, though, there's equal parts the low-scale response is the military government playing it smart when the Republican government demands a military response, or it masking a future non-state actor retaliation. I don't know how to parse that sentence at all. Citrus Peppercorn says, with what they're doing in the Gaza camps with what they're doing in Gaza, camps are not needed. Maybe mass graves. Yeah. Let's see here. How has the world reacted to these strikes? This part isn't going to be as out of date as how will Iran respond, because we already know how Iran has responded. They've already responded. The UK, France, and Germany reiterated that Iran could not be allowed nuclear weapons and urged Iran to enter talks. On Monday, UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy said Iran's leaders have to get serious about the off-ramp that is being made available to them. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the U.S. strikes were a dangerous escalation, while European Foreign Policy Chief Kajikalis urged all sides to return to the negotiating table. All right, Old Gus is given a clarification, and there's some weird shit in Russian from somebody who I do not know at all. You know what? Let's do the Russian person. So Russian to English translator. Let's see here. What do we have? Israel will be burned, and in 100 years, no one will remember why Israel was burned, but everyone will remember that they burned. I'm just curious, why do you want innocent civilians to die? Like, that's the thing that confuses me about a lot of this shit. Is that, yeah, Israel as a nation is doing terrible things to people, and I agree with that. The genocide of the Gazans need to be stopped. But much like how Germany still had citizens that needed to be able to fucking eat after World War II, there are still going to be Israeli citizens that had nothing to do with the fucking conflict, who still need to be able to eat afterwards, who still need to be able to live afterwards. And I feel like we do ourselves a disservice when we start dehumanizing those groups so heavily. It doesn't make a lot of sense to dehumanize them. It doesn't. Much like how every American is not individually responsible for the terrible things that America does to its enemies, holding every Israeli citizen responsible in the same way doesn't make any fucking sense to me. That sounds like using a good moral stance, like Gaza should not be threatened, the West Bank should not be taken over, etc., and then using that as a justification to engage in anti-Semitism. I've seen a lot of people do that, and I think they need to stop. It's like how you can be a leftist who recognizes that there is an obscene amount of money in politics, and that money needs to be removed from politics, and that money and influence has basically corrupted the world. And then to go from being in that sensible position to going, and all the money is Jewish. It's when you take that one extra step into being a bigot that things get a bit confusing for me, where I don't quite understand why you took that extra step. And I haven't seen any response from this person. And they were saying a bunch of Russian shit, so I'm just going to assume that that's a bot. And we'll be done. Gulf nations have called for de-escalation of the region. Okay. So, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to see what is going on recently. So CNN has a live updates version of this. Oil prices tumble as Iranian state media announces ceasefire deal. Oil prices, as a weird advertisement, don't ever do that, CNN. Oil prices extended their slide during Tuesday trade in Asia as Iranian state media announced a ceasefire deal, easing investors' concern over supply disruptions. Okay, I'm not super concerned about the price of oil. All right, Iranian state media announces ceasefire deal imposed on the enemy. Imposed on the enemy. That's an interesting way to put it. So what they're going to do is try to save face. What they're going to do is try to say that, yes, we would like a ceasefire. We are going to impose a ceasefire on our enemy. And, you know, on the one hand, it makes sense. On the one hand, that makes sense as a strategy. Because if you think about it, from the perspective of the average Iranian citizen, they're probably going to want their government to show some kind of strength. Just as anybody in any country who cares about how they look on the world stage is going to want their country to show some form of strength in opposition to whatever has befallen them. And the best way to do that is to go, oh no, they didn't throw a ceasefire on the table for us to sign. We're putting a ceasefire on the table for them to sign. I don't honestly care which one actually put the ceasefire on the table. I don't. All I care about is that civilian lives and civilian lives are respected and civilian casualties are lowered. That's what I care about more than anything. So let's continue on here. Iranian state media announced Tuesday a ceasefire has been imposed on the enemy after the country's military response to U.S. aggression, hours after Iran's retaliatory attack against the U.S. The SEPA successful military operations in response to the U.S. aggression and exemplary steadfastness and unity of our dear people in defending our land has imposed ceasefire on the enemy. An anchor with state-run Iran National News Network said in a live broadcaster. The anchor did not give a time for when the ceasefire would take place. So that explains why I was seeing that on the TVs at the gym today. So I hadn't looked at everything in the news in regards to this yet. I just knew that this would be in the news. And I was seeing stuff about a ceasefire in the news, just like on the panels while I was on the 30-minute workout. Said Bibi loses his position if it's peaceful, so it won't happen. This is where things get a bit interesting. So the Trump administration has already said that its response to this is going to be continued escalation. Its response to this is going to be to continue, anytime a retaliation happens, to further escalate retaliations. So either we're going to get a taco moment where Trump chickens out of this and says, no, a ceasefire was there, and then he'll take credit for the ceasefire, and then he'll then use that as a platform to say, I brought peace to the Middle East. That is one angle that Trump may end up doing. Trying to say, I brought peace to the Middle East. While Iran says, we imposed a ceasefire. I don't know what those words mean, Sarah, and I'm just going to assume that I don't care about what they mean. Then it says blood brought war to it in the first place. Said well reintroduced it. I mean, the war was already going on. That's one thing. Like, the war was already going on. It's happening between Israel and Iran anyway. All we're doing different at this point is just deciding to enter. That's what's happening, is we're deciding to enter. Sarah says, I mean, I want to see Orange hauled into the... I don't know what that means, Sarah. I have no idea what that means. And I do not strive for knowledge at this moment. Santa says, without letting Congress have a say in it first. That's another interesting thing to me. During all of this, Congress is supposed to have a say on whether we enter a war like this. Congress is supposed to be able to be part of the decision-making process here. And they really haven't been. We're doing more shit that I would expect a despot nation to do. Axel says, you think Trump cares about Congress? Oh, I know he doesn't. I know he's ignoring what's supposed to happen. He's ignoring Congress. Because in his eyes, despots show strength. And he wants more than anything to be a political despot. It's the reason why he had a giant military parade to show his strength. He wants to be seen in the same light as authoritarian dictators because he sees them as strong businessmen, where the employees are the country. MDS Twitchy says, you know why they call it Iran? Because Iran? I don't get it, but again, we'll see what happens with this. We'll see what he ends up doing. Again, I think that there are a couple of avenues here. He can try the show of strength shit, where he just continues to escalate and escalate and escalate, which, to be fair, is what he has said he's going to do. Or he can be the great peacemaker, the great deal maker. He can go that route. The backing out of the thing and then hoping nobody remembers the words he said, and then calling himself the great deal maker or the great peace broker, is more on brand for him, I think, in terms of what Trump's going to do. Citrus Peppercorn says the 2003 authorization of military force is still active. You just never give that shit up? We just let that keep happening and never stop, I guess? Welcome to America. Military authorization is done by the Commander-in-Chief and only the Commander-in-Chief. And it will continue to be this way until the end of time. Never gonna give, never gonna give. Yeah, we're just never gonna give that shit up, I guess. So last evening, only an hour after the successful missile attack by the Seraph on America's base in Qatar, in a begging-like manner of urging, Trump requested the initiation of a ceasefire in the imposed Zionist enemy war against our country, the anchor said. Okay, so Iran is all on board with trying to be the strong man here. Trump came begging for this. I wonder if they realize, and this is not me trying to say that America's the good guy here. They're not. We are not the good guy here. And I'm even willing to say Iran's not really the good guy here either. There's not a the good guy here. Except maybe the civilians that don't deserve being killed, you know. But in all this, I wonder what's going to happen when Iran and its media and everyone are constantly going, oh, Trump had to beg. Trump got on his knees. Trump licked our boots. What does the end result of that look like? When Fox News gets a hold of that shit and starts broadcasting that and going, what is Trump's response going to be to these claims of his weakness? I'm a bit concerned about what happens there. Then it says shit-flinging contest. I mean, it's going to be that. It's going to be a shit-flinging contest. Old Gus says, I wonder what other non-state actors are backed by Iran, though. Because using Hamas or Hezbollah would just play to pro-Trump propaganda. It would. It would. So here's my concern. Having been through this shit during the Bush presidency, my concern is that regardless of whether Trump decides to go with the I'm going to be the powerful authoritarian approach or I'm going to be the peacemaker approach, my concern over anything is that at the end of this, we're going to have people saying, oh, Trump did the right thing, and we should actually bomb more countries. I am concerned about that happening. I am very concerned because I watched the fervor for the blood of Afghani children when I was a kid. And make no mistake, we were taught as kids that every Afghani citizen was an enemy combatant, that they were being trained to hate America, that they were being trained to kill Americans. I am scared that we are going to see all of that same rhetoric again, where we're not going to think about the civilian lives that get lost in these conflicts as we escalate them. And make no mistake, the scariest thing about this is the fact that the rich and powerful people that make the decisions on whether or not the country goes to war, our country, their country, any country in between with us using proxies, doesn't matter. The people who are actively in charge of those decisions, it's never their kids that have to go to war. It's always you and me. If there's a conversation about a draft having to happen at any point, make no mistake, it will never be a senator's child that is the one sent on the front lines. It's always going to be me, you, and our kids. Always, always, always. When you engage in this war hawk mindset, always remember that the same is true for their country. It's never their political despots that actually end up taking the brunt of the damage. It's always the civilians. It's always the people who have no business being involved in a conflict who find themselves killed in said conflict. And it's been that way since the dawn of time. Political leaders are never the ones that pay these prices. It's always me, you, Joe Schmo over there. Whether you're on the left, liberal, conservative, we all bleed the exact same fucking blood. And we don't spend more time uniting against the people who bleed dollar green. We always end up fighting each other, even as we get sent off to wars that we did not want to happen in the first fucking place. Politicians lie so that poor people can die. My primary fear is that U.S. citizens, Iranian citizens, Israeli citizens, and as we're already seeing, citizens in Gaza, are all dying for some random fucking bureaucrat's wet dream. It's gross, it's disgusting, and there are only a handful of things we can do about it. My secondary worries are how rhetoric is going to shape how Trump is going to respond to this. Because the more he decides to escalate, the worse things get. And the more he decides to go into the, oh, I'm the great peacemaker rhetoric, the worse things get. Either way, things don't end up great. But there are a handful of things we can do about this. There are. It may seem like there's not, but there are a handful of things we can do about this. Obviously, you can protest. The point of a protest is to bring people together for a shared grievance so that they can learn to engage in further political action after the fact. A protest does not do a law on its own, but it is almost always a first step towards further political action, or at least it should be. And always be wary of people that think that it's not a first step and think that it's actually the final step. Those people are not your allies. Those people are not your friends. But definitely get politically involved. Definitely get involved in protests. Definitely get involved in your local election scenes. Because even though right now we have a despot who's ignoring Congress, and will continue to ignore Congress as long as it serves his purposes, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be engaged in shaping Congress from the bottom up into something that is much more representative of American beliefs, values, wants, and needs, as opposed to the wants and needs of an autocrat or the wants and needs of a businessman. And it may sound scary to go out and deal with cops, because that's what's going to happen if you're protesting. You're going to be dealing with cops. You're going to be dealing with counter-protesters. And, as you've seen from my channel, you might even just deal with failure. And that's really scary. The important thing in all of that is going to be to learn how to deal with it. Learn how to deal with being in a group of other like-minded people. Learn how to deal with being in a group of people who are being opposed by another group. Learn how to deal with police officers in a way that doesn't get you or anybody else injured. And most importantly, learn how to fail. If we want to make anything of the next 3 years that we have to deal with a political despot in our office, then we are going to have to get really cozy with failure and learning to learn from it as opposed to fear it. Anyway, that's my thought. You're not going to change anything from your keyboard. You're not going to change anything by yelling on the internet. All that does is waste your time. All that does is waste your time, resources, and energy. Go out, get politically involved, canvass for a politician that you actually believe in, or run yourself. Run for something. There's tons of resources available for you so that you can actually get the capital you need to run for office. Go out there and do your shit. I'm actively involved in a campaign for one of my local politicians right now who's trying to oust Marjorie Taylor Greene. And if I can do it with 0 experience and 0 time, you can do it too. That's all I got on this one. Thank you all for watching. Subscribe if you haven't already. And hopefully you found this helpful. And hopefully you found this to be better than just doom and gloom and shrieking, oh my god, we're going to go into World War III. Maybe we are, maybe we aren't. We have no control over that, but we do have control over several micro things that are going to be important, leading to whether or not a decision like that even happens. And I think it's important to keep that in perspective. Focus on the things you can control. Work harder to gain more things you can be in control of. And don't freak out. Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full-time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Briskreek, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Limor Pinku, Love Bunny Games, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Aurora, Leela Ururaka, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press, though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.